We fade to black and reappear with Izuku standing in the position of attention, straight and tall. All for One explains to Izuku about his third quirk, named Tethered. Now, Izuku, with this quirk, you and your brother Shoto are connected to each other, and that includes your quirks. That means you can also conjure fire, just like him. But considering the fact that you thought you had ice this whole time, and you never thought about throwing fire either, Izuku stands there like a zombie, saying, "No." All for One speaks. Well, from now on, you're going to use your fire. Understand? Izuku nods his head in agreement as he says, "Yes." "Good," said All for One. "Now, try and use fire." Izuku gets in a stance, with his feet apart and his arms extended out. His arms began to grow ice crystals, and he only shot ice. All for One speaks. "Come on, think of something that involves fire." Izuku concentrates, and thinking of an erupting volcano, he then began to shoot fire and ice. This goes back and forth, from fire to ice, until it's all fire. And Izuku's body was covered in Zed fire. He looks down and is amazed, but then he realizes that his clothes aren't catching on fire. He looks up to All for One and says, "My clothes are fireproof." "You had this plan all along, didn't you?" All for One just stands there, giving out a small laugh, and says, "Yes, I did. Now, with that out of the way, I have a present for you." All for One walks over to a table, with a wooden box on top of it. He picks up the box and brings it over to Izuku and says, "Here, this is for you." Izuku takes the box from All for One, opens it, and his eyes widen to see the chains that he took from the house. The very same chains that Endeavor wrapped Izuku's neck around, forcefully making him change into a wolf. Izuku puts the box down and takes the 7-foot-long chains from the box. They were restored and polished, as if they weren't the same chains from before. All for One speaks. "I hope you like it. Now, send your power through them." Izuku looked to All for One, saying, "What?" All for One continues, "I will be teaching you on ways that you can use your fire and ice." Izuku couldn't help but feel appreciative towards All for One, even though he may be the bad guy. Izuku just nodded his head in agreement and says, "Thank you, All for One." Deep down, Izuku wanted to use the chains to defeat All for One, but he knew that All for One was stronger than him, and the parasite in his head would only stop him. 3 weeks have passed. Izuku was in the middle of training. All for One speaks. "Cryo tornado." Izuku whips the chains in a circle over his head as the room began to fill with snow and a gust of wind swinging as he swings around the chains, making a snow tornado. Izuku stops, and so does the tornado. All for One speaks again. "Brilliant. Good job. Now, Ice Whip." Izuku conjures ice onto the chains. He winds back his arm and hits the ground. And when it hits the ground, large ice daggers appeared in the spot where the tip of the chain hit the ground. Izuku stops and looks in the direction of All for One. He speaks. "Excellent. Now, Pyro Twister." Izuku then uses fire to conjure fire onto the chains, doing the same thing he did with Cryo Tornado, but this time it was fire. The room began to heat up as fire appeared around Izuku, circulating him over and over again. Great job. Now, Fire Whip. Izuku is feeling extremely exhausted for the past 3 weeks. He hasn't really been sleeping or eating much because if he doesn't succeed in the tricks that All For One tries to teach him, he does not get food or water. And so, for the past 3 weeks, Izuku has been training to become strong, even though he still doesn't feel strong right now to fight All For One. Although, he may have found a way to free himself from this brain parasite. Izuku conjures fire onto the chains again and whips them into the air. When the wave of the chains reached to the end, a huge gush of fire would appear in the direction that the chain was whipped. Izuku takes a couple of breaths, but then gets an applaud from All For One. Great job, that was really good. Anyway, that concludes today's training. Izuku bows down and walks his way to his room. When he gets there, he shuts the door and sits down on his bed. Taking a deep breath, inhale, and then exhale. Okay, just need to concentrate. Izuku gets in a meditative position and closes his eyes. Focusing on his breathing, he starts meditating. He started to think about Shoto and whatever is happening next. He hopes that he doesn't get caught in the crossfire. We then transition into Izuku's mind. He's flying through what appears to be some sort of reality where it's all colors and they're just warping into different shapes and abstract images. And when it ends, he finds himself what appears to be a classroom. Looking around, Izuku sees that there are about 20 desks and one giant window that goes outside. Looking behind him, to his surprise, he sees Shoto, his brother, sitting in one of the desks. Izuku notices the scar on Shoto's face and remembers the bandage over his eye all those years ago. That must have been an after effect of when Mom poured the boiling water on his face, Izuku said. Izuku speaks. Oh, Shoto, man, I didn't want you to see me like this. Oh, man, it's been so long, and I've missed you so much. Izuku realizes that Shoto isn't looking at him. He calls his name many times, but nothing happens. It's like he can't hear him nor see him. Izuku sits down in the chair next to Shoto, feeling sad that his brother can't make contact with him. He speaks to himself, saying, "Why am I so weak? Why can't I be strong like you?" Izuku grows even more sad and says, "You were always there to put a brave face on for me, and I always let you get hurt. You're my best friend, and I love you." A tear falls down Izuku's face, and when the tear hit the floor, Shoto felt something odd. He looked around as if he feels a disturbance. Izuku missed what had happened because he was wiping away his tears. He gets out of the desk, walks over to Shoto and says, "I wish you could see me for just a second, Shoto." Izuku touches Shoto's shoulder, and this made Shoto jump out of his seat. And in doing so, it kind of scared Izuku. Shoto sees Izuku, Izuku sees Shoto. Both of the boy's eyes widen to the realization that Shoto sees him. He speaks. Shoto? Shoto speaks. Izuku. Shoto was about to reach out and touch Izuku, but Izuku began to flicker like a faulty flashlight, appearing and disappearing from Shoto's sight. Izuku doesn't know what's going on. Shoto was about to do something, but then Izuku disappeared from his sight completely. This left Shoto confused and even more worried for his brother. Izuku found himself in the dark place with the parasite standing there about 10 feet from Izuku. It speaks.
What were you doing just now?
Izuku's face shows sign of annoyance and says, I was just meditating. You should probably try it sometime. The shadowy wolf then approaches Izuku and says,
You know what? I'm feeling a little bit nice today. I have something I want to ask you, Izuku.
Izuku says, I'm listening. It speaks.
Do you think Mother deserves to be locked in that mental institute?
Izuku looks up in surprise. He had forgotten about his mom for a while and says, Mom, wow, I really haven't been thinking about her lately. Not ever since I got back in town. Izuku had a flashback to all the times his mother was kind to him. He even thought back to when the time she saved him from Dad, when he was about to stomp on him and she shielded him. She was protecting me that day, said Izuku. The shadowy wolf saw Izuku's memories and says,
Oh, well that's not nice. You know, if you ask me, she doesn't deserve to be there. And if you want to know what I think we should go get her and bring her here.
Izuku looks to the wolf. With a sigh, Izuku says, yeah, we should go get her. We then appeared back in reality. A few hours have passed. He gets up from his bed and walks over to the door leading to the bar. He opens the door, and the bar is empty, with Korigiri, the only person there. He speaks. Oh, Izuku, how are you doing? Izuku responds back saying, I'm fine. Walking up to the counter and taking a seat, he says, where's All for One? I want to ask him something. Korigiri picks up a glass and starts cleaning it while he thinks. He's out at the moment. What is it that you wanted to ask him? Izuku speaks. I want to go break my mother out of the mental institution. Korigiri was taken off by that and says, well then, that was unexpected. Let me go call him and inform him of this. Korigiri picks up the phone and calls All for One. All for One picks up, and Korigiri explains to him about what Izuku wants to do. A few seconds later, Korigiri gives Izuku the phone. He speaks. Hello? All for One then says, So you wish to go get your mother, is that so? Yes, I do, said Izuku, and I just wanted to know if that was okay with you. A moment of silence goes by, and then All for One speaks. Sure, Izuku. You're more than welcome to go get your mummy, but you do have a time limit. If you're not back within 2 hours, I'm going to send a search party for you, and then I'm going to have them go get your brother Shoto. Do you understand? Izuku's heart started racing, trying to prevent from saying something that would make All for One mad. So, he takes a deep breath and says, "Yes, I do." "Good. Now go. Your time starts now." All for One hangs up the phone. After he does, Izuku takes a sigh and says, "Okay, my best guess is that she's at the Mosu General Hospital. So, I guess that's my only option." Izuku walks towards the door, but before he opens the door, Korigiri speaks. "Good luck, Izuku." Izuku looks in the direction of Korigiri and says, "Thanks." He leaves. A few minutes before he arrives at the hospital, he decides to grab some quick cash. Looking over, he saw an ATM. He approached it as he puts the hoodie over his head, looking around, making sure that no one sees what he's about to do. Placing a hand on the screen of the ATM, he freezes its circuits, and the machine starts sparking. And then, somehow, it spits out money. Thousands and thousands of dollars worth of money. Izuku fills his pockets with as much money as he can and runs when he hears someone. A few minutes later, Izuku is counting the money. He counted it up to somewhat around or more $2,000 worth of money. He picks it up and heads to the hospital. Looking to the front of the hospital, he thinks to himself that it might take forever until he finds his mom, but then he sees someone looking outside their window at him. It's a woman with snow white hair and eyes that are space gray. She waves, not knowing who she is waving at, not knowing it's her son, with his hoodie on. Izuku waves back while he gives a smile. He heads inside, but before he says anything to the front counter person, he thinks, "Man, I should probably just go up there and just say hi. I don't need to take her from here." Izuku walks up to the counter and speaks to a woman, saying, "Hi, I'm looking to visit Ray Todoroki." The woman says, "Okay, I just need you to fill out this sheet." "Wait a minute. You're the son of Endeavor." Izuku's eyes widen as he immediately objects to these facts, saying, No, my name's Shinmaku." The woman then retorted, saying, "No, you're definitely the son of Endeavor. You've been missing for 9 years. Hang on, I'm gonna give him a call." Izuku ran out of the building. He looks up to his mom's room floor. He says, "Dang it, she might have called the police. So, I'm going to need to hurry this up." Izuku walks into the perspective view of the of his mom's window. He conjures up a huge mountain of ice that led to his mom's room. Thinking quick, Izuku conjured up 4 more ice daggers from the ground and plants them in 4 corners of the room. Each dagger he stabbed pierced through the wall. Izuku then places both hands on the wall. He freezes it at the same height and length of the room. Ray sees all of this and is unsure what is going on. She stands back, being afraid. When Izuku freezes the whole way through, he then winds his right arm back and punches down the wall while the rest of the building stayed intact. Izuku entered the room. He sees his mom's face to face. She's frightened. Izuku speaks. "Come on, we gotta go." Izuku approaches Ray. Ray was hesitant for a second, saying, "No, stay away from me," trying to kick Izuku away with her feet. But Izuku picks her up and carries her over his shoulders. Rei was kicking and punching, trying to fight back. But Izuku was moving around too much for her to try anything. Izuku then slid down the ice he made. As he was going down, police cars drove right in front of him. Thinking quickly while he was still sliding down, Izuku jumped as ice formed just underneath his feet, giving him a great distance from the police, landing on top of another rooftop. Rei sees this and says, "Ice? But that means..." Izuku continues to run. While running, Rei starts punching Izuku's back, saying, "Put me down!" Izuku heard a voice in the sky saying, "Hey, can you stop for a second?" He stops, looking up to see a man with large red wings, wearing a yellow-orange coat, while also wearing headphones that have eye protection attached to them. The man speaks. "Hey there, what are you doing? I was just told by a police that you kidnapped that woman. That's illegal, right?" Izuku puts Rei down and turns to face Hawks. Hawks sees Izuku's face and says, "Oh wait, you're just a kid." All right. Listen, kid. I don't know why you're doing this, but I'm sure if you just return the woman back to where you got her from, we can let you off with a warning. But if things proceed any further, things might get a little rough. Do you understand? A few seconds of silence goes by. Izuku just stands there. Hawks lands a few feet away from him, saying, "I see you're thinking about it. That's good." Hawks slowly approaches Izuku, saying, "I know you can still do the right thing." Izuku then slowly looks up, opening his eyes as they slowly glow white. Snow began to fall from the sky. This takes Hawks off, and he says, "Wait, why is it snowing? It's like 60 degrees right now." Izuku then whispered the word blizzard. All of a sudden, the wind starts blowing heavily as it began to snow hard sideways. Rei was bewildered by what was going on. Hawks looks to Izuku with his eyes still glowing and says, "Wait, are you doing this?" Hawks's wings then blew open, and in doing so, he was blown away. Izuku took this distraction opportunity. He picks up his mother and starts to run again. After a few minutes of running and making sure that no one saw him, Izuku hid in an alley with his mom, putting her down to see if the coast is clear. Rei finally decides to fight back. She uses her ice quirk to conjure an ice dagger. Izuku then turns around to see his mother with her dagger raised towards him. She says, "That's it. I've had enough of this. Who are you?" said Rei. Izuku grabs his hoodie with both of his hands and lowered them down, saying, "Hi, Mom. It's been a long time." Rei's eyes widen as she can't believe who she is seeing. A tear falls down her face as she says, "Izuku?" Rei drops the dagger to the ground, and it shatters. She then pulls Izuku in for a hug, and Izuku hugs her back. A few minutes later, Izuku took Rei, his mom, to a hotel named Okintelu. They headed to their room. Izuku looked to the time. All for One said that he had 2 hours until he had to be back there. He had about 1 hour left until he had to go back. They both sit down, and Rei starts the conversation. "Izuku, why did you kidnap me from the hospital?" Izuku hesitant to speak, but eventually does. "Mom, you didn't deserve to be there. After what Dad put you through. It's not fair." "But you could get in a lot of trouble for this," said Rei. Izuku then said, "I don't care. I haven't seen you in a long time. Can't we just talk for a minute? Ray thinks for a second and says, Okay, I'm fine with that. Ray sits down and says, So, where have you been all this time? When Shoto told me what had happened and nothing ever came up about it for the past year, I thought I'd lost a son. Ray looks to Izuku's face and notices the cutting scar that's on the left side of his face that curves from the far left side of his forehead down around his eye. She speaks. And also, where did that scar come from? Izuku smiles and says, I've been living in the woods for the past few years. And as for the scar, Shoto did that one, but it was an accident. He didn't mean to. Ray looks to the floor and then back to Izuku and asks, So, why didn't you ever come back? Izuku takes off his hoodie as he sighs and says, When Shoto pushed me, I hit my head a couple of times, rolling down the side of a mountain. It was a few trees, and then I landed in heavy water river. It washed me down the stream, and at one point I hit my head again, and I think I blacked out, and I was washed up on shore, or at least I think I was. I'm not entirely sure what had happened after I woke up, but I remember changing into a wolf and a pack of gray wolves took me in. They trained me, and then Izuku then had a flashback to when his wolf family was slaughtered in cold blood. In reality, Izuku stood there, still, glitching a little bit. Ray speaks. Izuku, are you okay? Izuku continues standing there, not saying anything, staring off into space. Izuku, in his flashback, remembers all the innocent blood that was splattered all over the trees, along with the newborn pups, dead. Izuku then leaned against the table, holding himself up with both of his arms. He breathes rapidly as Rei grows concerned for her child. She approached him, saying, Izuku, what's the matter? What's wrong? Izuku then remembered the last request Khan asked of him. Rei puts both hands on Izuku's shoulder as Izuku remembers crushing Khan's heart to end his suffering. Izuku grunts, walking around the room while stuttering, holding both of his hands up to his head, wanting this nightmare to stop. But it keeps going. In the flashback, Izuku is fighting the Makapichu. Izuku screams at the top of his lungs as he reaches out to grab the Makapichu's neck with his bare hands. The flashback ends. Izuku opens his eyes to his right hand around his mother's throat. She stands there, scared with tears falling down her face. Izuku immediately lets go of Rei. He slowly backs up, looking down to his hands. He began to cry, balling up into the corner. Rei sees this and slowly walks over to comfort her child. She crouches down and she speaks to him. Shh, 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 shh. It's okay, son. It's okay. It's okay. Rei then pulls Izuku in for a hug while still on the floor. A few minutes later, Izuku has regained his composure. Izuku looks to the clock and sees that he now has 30 minutes left until he has to go back to the bar. He speaks. Thanks, Mom, and I'm sorry for choking you. It's okay, son. Now, are you comfortable enough to tell me what had happened in the woods? Izuku takes a deep breath and begins to explain to his mom his times in the woods. Some parts were scary for Ray, but then when the conversation got real, gruesome, when Izuku told her about his wolf family being killed by a monster and how it helped him regain his memories, he wanted to tell her about his involvement with the League of Villains, but he had something else he wanted to get off his mind. He speaks. Mom, why didn't you ever fight? Ray looks to Izuku in confusion. Well, what do you mean, Izuku? Asked Ray. Izuku stands up and says, I mean, why didn't you fight back against Dad? Ray then looked down to the ground, taking a deep breath. She looks to Izuku and said, It wasn't easy, Izuku. You know, there was a time when your father was kind, before he became a power-obsessed control freak. Izuku takes a deep inhale and says, But look what had happened. You let him force me to be a wolf, alone in the dark at night, with only my siblings to ever give a damn about me. The attention in the room grows quite rapidly. And what's worse, he pushed you around, he hit you, insults you, and look where it led. You let it happen so many times that you lost your mind. Toya is burnt and missing. You ended up scarring one of your children for life, and I was chained into the back like a freaking dog. Ray then stood up, frustrated. I loved your father, Izuku. There are just some things that you just don't understand, son. Izuku then retorts, saying, Oh no, I understand. I've watched you, and I've listened to you. And what I've learned is that if someone is bigger than you, someone who has more power than you simply just submit to them and learn to live with it. That's what I've learned from you. Ray wanted to say something, but Izuku spoke. So, why weren't you strong for us? You know what? No, I take that back. Why weren't you ever strong for yourself? Because deep down inside all of us, Mom, there is a strong, independent person, but you chose not to be that. So why? Why was that the only place that I had happiness was with the wolves? Why is it that Shoto is the strong one and I'm so weak? Why was it that I was born with this wolf curse? Why is it that I'm so different from everyone else? Izuku began to cry, wanting to know why his life was so unfair. Rei drops a few tears herself because Izuku wasn't exactly wrong. Rei walks over to Izuku and she hugs him again. I'm sorry, Izuku. I was thinking about you the entire time when you were outside. It always ate me up every night knowing that I was too weak to do anything for you. Your father, he he threatened to kill you if he ever spoke about you in his presence. I was scared to do anything for your well-being. I didn't know what to do. Ray looked down to Izuku and said, Now, son, listen. I don't know why you have a wolf quirk, but I'm going to tell you this. You are special. We all aren't meant to be the same because if we were, things would be very boring. And you're not weak, son. You're stronger than you think. You survived out there all on your own, and you fought a monster. And your sheer determination to see your brothers and sisters is what kept you alive. I'm sorry, son. You're right. If I had done something, this wouldn't be happening. A minute later, Izuku calmed down, and he says, Well, if I were you, I would smack Dad across the face and say, That's your son, you hot-headed lump. Deal with it. Izu- Izuku then chuckled, and in doing so, so did Rei. After the mood has been lightened, Izuku looks to the time. He now has 20 minutes left. Izuku stands up, looks to his mother, and says, Mom, listen closely, because I don't have much time. Ever since I got back, I got in with the wrong people. Ray was confused, saying, Oh, what do you mean? I mean, I got in with a group of bad guys and a power obsessed mob boss that threatens to hurt people, and I can't back out. Ray's face then changes to worried. She then says, Why can't you just leave? Because, Mom, they know that I'm a Todoroki, and they know about my third quirk. Well, what is your third quirk? Asked Ray. My third quirk is called tethered. It's when two twin siblings share a bond of touch and quirks. If Shoto gets hurt, I feel it, and the same goes for me. I don't really know for sure if I die, he dies as well, or what, but I can't take the risk. I have to do what they say, or else they hurt Shoto. Ray grows worried and says, Wait, what do you mean by you share quirks? Izuku answers, Yeah, so my tethering not only tethers us together, it also tethers our quirks as well. Just about 3 weeks ago, this man, the leader of the League of Villains, has been forcibly training me to use my fire that I didn't know I possessed. It's actually very strong. Well, does Shoto know about this? Asked Ray. I think he does, but he's probably not well officiated with it, said Izuku. But I don't know if he knows he can change into a wolf yet. But Mom, listen, I don't know what's about to happen next, but they're getting ready for an attack somewhere. Ray then says, So why don't you just go to the police? Izuku was going to answer, but the parasite in his head started messing with his mind, giving Izuku a headache. It then said,
Don't talk about me.
said the parasite. Izuku ran over to the table with a pen and paper. He closes his eyes and writes down on it and gives the paper to his mom. She reads it. Parasite in my prefrontal cortex. It controls me. Ray speaks. Izuku. Izuku cuts her off, saying, Mom, I may have a way to stop all of this, but right now I need to go, and I need you to stay here. Do not leave this room unless you absolutely have to. Okay? Ray nods her head. Izuku gives her the rest of the money that he had and said, Here, take this. Use it to order food. Just don't leave this room. Izuku heads towards the door, but Ray stops him, saying, Wait, Izuku, where did you get this money from? Izuku looked to his mom, with the door open and one foot already out the door. He talks in a stuttering voice. I stole it from an ATM. What? Asked Ray. I'm sorry, Mom. I gotta go. Bye for now. Izuku closed the door, leaving Ray all alone. Izuku runs back to the bar. As he's running, the thing in his brain talks to him.
Man, things were getting interesting back there, and then you started forgiving her. Ugh, makes me feel sick.
While Izuku is running, he speaks. Well, forgiveness is something that we all need. We're not perfect. I guess the same could be said for Dad. While running, all of the memories of his father treating him horribly overloaded his mind.
Oh please, he treated you so bad, and not to mention, your mom said he threatened to kill you if they ever spoke about you in his presence. What kind of father does that to his own child?
Izuku ignores the thing and keeps running. He makes it back to the bar with 2 minutes to spare. He opens the door to come across All for One, sitting in the bar chair. Izuku speaks. Oh, hi, sir. All for One then says, there's no need to be so formal. You know my name. Just call me by that. Okay, said Izuku. I have a question. Oh, and what would that be? You said this thing you planted in my head has to kill my brother Shoto in order to take complete control of me. But what about the tethered quirk? If Shoto dies, doesn't that mean I die with him? All for One chuckles as he stands up from his seat and slowly walks towards Izuku and says, your tethered quirk is like two lions fighting over the last piece of food. This food is your life, but there can only be one winner. Let's say the other lion, who is not you, defeats you, and the other lion won. He eats the food, and after he's done, he looks to his fallen comrade and realizes that he's now completely alone. He may have eaten, but he feels empty inside. At what cost, he thought. So you see, Izuku, once you or your brother dies, the tethered quirk will be broken, and there will be only one survivor. Izuku looks to the ground and says, I see. And what about the fire? If he dies, if he's dead, there won't be another person to attach it to. All for One speaks. The fire quirk has been permanently attached to you. When it first activated, your quirk permanently became a part of Shoto, and Shoto's quirk permanently became a part of you. All for One puts a hand on Izuku's shoulder and says, why don't you go get some rest? We will discuss the plans tomorrow. Izuku then asks, what plan? All for One chuckles while saying, you'll find out soon enough. Now, off you go. He pats Izuku on his back, gesturing him to his room. Izuku didn't say anything. Izuku makes his way to his room, closing the door. His blood began to boil as he clenches his fists and they caught on fire. Izuku then started punching the air as if he was fighting somebody who was invisible. While he is doing this, he was talking as he was grunting, why, 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 why? Why is this happening to me? I just, I, I just want my family. An emotional river overflows Izuku and he starts to cry as he crawls into his bed, flooding his pillow with his tears, looking out to the window to see a crescent moon with stars twinkling clear in the dark sky. Seeing such a beautiful sight calms Izuku's nerves. Looking around at the stars, he sees the Lopus constellation. He remembers the last words that Sira said to him. He remembered the last words Sira said to him before requesting him to go find her some food. I believe you are Lopus to us, Shinmaku. You are meant to be the light that shines the path of hope to us. Izuku speaks before falling asleep. The light that shines the path of hope. Izuku then falls asleep. It's the next day. Izuku is training by himself, using ice on his right side and fire on his left. He then grabs the chains and sends ice through one half and fire through the other half, repeatedly whipping it in the air, throwing ice in one direction and fire in the other. His training was interrupted by All For One entering the room. He calls to Izuku. Izuku stops. What's up? Looking in the direction of All For One. Come with me. It's about time that we discuss the plan of attack. Izuku follows All For One to the next room. In this room are a group of bad guys with unusual quirks. All For One walks onto the podium and tells everyone about his plan. Tomorrow you all will be infiltrating the unforeseen simulation joint. That is where All Might will be attending. Also, you will be following Shigaraki's instructions. Anything he says goes. Do you understand? Everyone in the room then responds with, yes, sir. All For One continues. Good. As you all know, none of you are strong enough to kill All Might, so that is why this will be your contingency plan if anything goes sideways. All For One then points to a closed door. It opens, revealing something that looks a little familiar to Izuku. His eyes widen as he looks into the eyes of this creature as it walks. Every step it takes shook the entire room, and everyone was taken off by how muscular this thing was. Its scars all over its body, and its brain was exposed. Its eyes had no soul behind them, and its mouth was that of a beak right off a bird. After a few seconds of looking, Izuku finally remembers where he saw this thing from. No way, it can't be. I killed it. How? You're the... While in the middle of thinking, the parasite in Izuku's head speaks, saying,
The Macapichu.
The creature makes its way to the podium next to All For One. He speaks. This is what we call a nomu. This one is very special. Other than it being visibly strong, it also has a great shock absorption and a great healing factor. This should be able to take down the symbol of peace with ease. Izuku slowly walks up to the podium next to the nomu. Looking closer at it, Izuku, after what felt like an eternity, speaks with a very hesitant tone in his voice. You made this? All For One turned to face Izuku, saying, yes, we've made plenty of these things in the past. You know what? I think you may have came across one of these. It was a prototype. Izuku's eyes widen as he comes to the realization of what's going on. All For One speaks. Oh yes, you called it the Macapichu? Is that right? Izuku felt like his heart had stopped beating. The League of Villains are the reason the Wolf Tribe has been killed because of him. Izuku looks to All For One. Taking a deep inhale and then exhale, his heart began to beat rapidly, racing. All the anger from the beginning of his life, to his father treating him very badly, to losing his mother, to being separated from his brothers and sister, to losing his wolf family in cold blood, all being let out as an attack. But before anything can happen, Izuku speaks. It's all your fault! All for One stands there as ice began to form on the ceiling. Snow began to fall. One of the guys then said, wait, is this snow? What the hell? How the hell is it snowing indoors? As this is going on, all four corners of the room began to catch a blaze of fire. "Oh man, what the hell is going on?" said one guy. All Izuku wanted to do was take down All for One. Izuku's face then turned to a fit of rage as the snow began to fall harder and faster, as the fire in the corner of the room began to grow out of control. While this is going on, All for One never broke his stare between him and Izuku. After a few seconds, Izuku finally speaks. "It's all your fault, you bastard!" Izuku charges at All for One with his chains drawn, setting them ablaze. Izuku swings the chains in All for One's direction, only for them to be stopped by the nomu grabbing it. Izuku looked to the nomu, surprised. The nomu then uses both of its hands to tug at the chains, and in doing so, reeling Izuku in, pulling him down to the ground. Izuku, being quick on his feet as he can, warps the chains around the nomu's feet and runs in between his legs, getting behind it. He then jumps over it, landing in front of the nomu. Izuku then pulled the chains hard as he could, making the nomu flip over and landing on its back. Izuku then ran up to the nomu's neck and then conjured ice onto his feet, and then began to stomp down repeatedly on the nomu's neck until he heard the sound of a bone breaking. The nomu lies there, motionless. Izuku looks back up to All for One and is about to get him next when something grabs his leg. He looks down to see the nomu grabbing his leg. Izuku was in much bewilderment, thinking to himself, "Wait, what? But I killed it! What the hell?" The nomu's throat then began to heal back to normal as if Izuku hadn't done anything to it. Within a flash, the nomu then sat up like a zombie rising from its grave. It slowly began to stand up as it holds Izuku by his leg, lifting him up, holding him upside down. The nomu then threw Izuku towards the rest of the crowd. They all moved out of the way as Izuku hit the floor. Izuku quickly gets up to his feet. Shigaraki was about to step in, but All for One stopped him, saying, No, just watch." The nomu starts walking towards Izuku. He then had to think quickly, and so he turned into his Arctic wolf form. He then gives out a howl and calls upon a pack to aid him. More than 20 clones appeared. Everyone in the room looks not only in amazement, but also frightened. The nomu stares at the army of wolves. Izuku looks to the nomu, ready to attack. He growls as his ears droop backwards. The nomu takes a step forward. Izuku, along with his army of wolves, then run towards the nomu. Izuku jumps up as he uses frostbite, conjuring ice onto his teeth and biting the nomu on the left side of his neck. Izuku's teeth dig deep into the nomu's skin. The nomu was about to grab Izuku to get him off, but then he was overwhelmed by the army of wolves. These wolves were chomping and biting the nomu on its hands and its legs, ripping it apart. Everyone who was watching are horrified of what they were seeing. Most people fell to their knees, as some were just frozen with fear. All for One, even watching, he was amazed by what he was seeing. Izuku sees something wrong with the nomu. It is being apprehended, but it doesn't seem to be bothered by the attacks that they are inflicting upon him. He must not be able to feel pain. That means I need to end this quickly while I still have the upper hand. Using all of his might, Izuku bites deeper and deeper into the nomu. The nomu starts fighting back, throwing the wolves off of him. Izuku knew he had to be quick before it came for him. When Izuku thinks his teeth are in deep in the nomu, he uses a new move I personally like to call Flash Freeze. Think of it as a zombie bite. Only if Izuku bites you, you don't become a wolf, you die. Here's what's happening. When Izuku bit into the nomu, he then let out a lot of ice crystals into the nomu's bloodstreams. As the ice crystals surged through the nomu's bloodstreams, they froze all the nomu's innards, from its livers to its kidneys to its heart, and then eventually its brain. Just outside the nomu, Izuku lets go of it and ordered his pack to back off, as the nomu then began to shake and shiver. The nomu's skin then turned a bright baby blue, and then it began to grow ice crystals all over its body as it slowly stopped moving, and then cracks began to travel from its brain down to its feet. It then exploded all over the place, with bits and pieces of shaved ice resembling that of a snow cone. The nomu was defeated. All that was left was All for One. Izuku knew that all he had to do was simply bite All for One, and it would be over. And so he tries. Him and his army start running towards All for One's direction. Izuku has nothing but sheer determination flowing through him. Other people tried to get in his way, but whoever tried was either attacked by his wolves or frozen. Izuku got closer and then closer, and then he leaped into the air, ready to bite All for One. But then, All for One then distorted Izuku's electrical fields inside of his mind. This was not only hurting Izuku, but it was hurting the parasite as well, including all the wolves that were assisting Izuku. They were all shaking and tripping over each other. Izuku landed on his side, falling overwards. He slowly tries to stand back up, but his knees felt so weak and his head made him extremely dizzy. He walks towards All for One, but he eventually passes out. We fade to black. Izuku wakes up. His vision was blurry at first. His head slowly lifted up, as the afterimage of a window is the first thing that he sees. His vision slowly returned to him. Shaking his head left to right, his vision then cleared. Looks around to see that he is in a room where he is imprisoned with bars and only one window, also barricaded. He looks down to see that he has been chained down onto a chair made of iron. Izuku looks around some more, and he sees a wooden door right behind him that looks like it was his only exit. Izuku tries to break the chains, but he was wrapped so tightly that he couldn't even move, although he had enough chest room to breathe. Izuku struggles for a few minutes, and after some time, he only got tired at the end. After a few minutes of breathing, the wooden door opens with All for One and Shigaraki entering the room. They both approach. All for One speaks from behind the bars. Ah, Izuku, you're finally awake. Izuku stays silent. All for One opens the cell door and enters, slowly walking towards Izuku. Entering, Izuku just stares at the wall. All for One kneels down to Izuku's level. He speaks. Listen, Izuku. I didn't anticipate one of our prototype nomus would kill your second family. Izuku continues to sit there forcefully, not saying anything. Izuku continues to forcibly sit there, not saying anything, but All for One continues. Listen, Izuku, that was a test to see if you have been training yourself behind my back. Clearly, you have a new ability I wasn't aware of. It also looks like you frosted the nomu from the inside, and somehow you took out its healing factor, and you were able to kill it. I applaud you, Izuku. You truly are something else. All for One looks to the door, saying, Come on in. All of a sudden, the room began to shake as if a giant was entering the room. And what entered Izuku's sight next filled him with disbelief and rage. Standing there, tall, its skin was gray, and its claws were razor sharp, along with its teeth. Its body was that of a bodybuilder. It was very muscular, and its eyes were milky white, and had no soul behind them, just like the other nomu before him. All for One speaks. I can tell by that look that you've met this one before. Well, let's see if this helps you more. All for One raised his hand up and then lowered it down. Words. The familiar nomu then got down onto its knees and then raised its head up, revealing a scar of a bite mark just at the center of its throat. There was no doubt that this was the Macapichu, and they somehow brought it back to life. Izuku's heart began to race with every breath he took. It got more and more aggressive with an exhale. And with one last inhale, Izuku yelled at the top of his lungs, "Oh, I'm gonna kill all of you! Ah!" Ice began to form on the walls around them. But then Izuku felt a touch on the back of his head. Izuku's eyes widen as he remembers who he saw come into the room with All for One. Izuku reluctantly had to stop doing what he was going to do. As Shigaraki whispered to him, "Listen, Izuku. After all you've been through, you truly have my sympathy. But there are certain things I cannot allow you to do. So keep this in mind. If you try anything, I will kill you with no hesitation. Do you got that?" Izuku didn't say anything, nor did he want to move. He knew that if he was going to survive, he was going to have to do as they say, like he's been doing, even if that means staring into the eyes of the very being that killed his family. Izuku looked down to the ground. All for One places a hand on Izuku's chin, lifting it back up. He speaks. "Yes, Izuku, this is indeed the same nomu you killed back in the mountains. And yes, we went to those mountains and we brought him back to life. Now, back to what I was saying before. That was a test earlier to see if you have been training, developing your quirk. And clearly, you have been. So, I gave this nomu a few quirks. Allow me to enlist them all for you. For one, his skin is indestructible. And as you see here, I have given it much more muscle mass, so it's very strong. And as for its other quirk, I gave him this one just for you. You see, Izuku, you have caused trouble for our allies, and you destroyed one of our strongest nomus. And something tells me that after all you've experienced, you're going to retaliate against us. So, therefore, you will be subjected to 3 punishments. 1. This nomu, the Makapiju as you call it, will keep you company all night long. Izuku angrily looks to the monster as he clenches his fists with anger. All for One snaps his fingers in front of Izuku to regain his attention. He speaks. Listen up here, Izuku. Your second punishment is that I'm going to spread the parasite and latch it on to another part of your brain called the cerebellum. All for One, with his index finger, places it on the center of Izuku's forehead. As he slowly glides his finger around Izuku's head to the back, pointing to where the cerebellum is located. He slightly taps the back of Izuku's head as he explains. You see, Izuku, the cerebellum is another part of the human brain that functions coordination. But you will be aware of your surroundings. You won't be gone yet, but everything this parasite does, you will bear witness to everything, including when it kills your brother. Izuku grows angry as he begins to lose control of his breathing. Shigaraki still has 4 fingers on the back of Izuku's head. So instead, he takes a deep breath and he asks him a question. Why didn't you just do that in the first place? What was the point of putting me through all this if you could have just had true control over me all this time? All for One chuckles and then speaks. Because I wanted you to at least have some humanity left before I did this. Now seems like the right time. Oh, and for your third punishment, All for One then points to the nomu and says it involves this nomu's quirk that I implanted just for you. I like to call it flash drive. You know what a flash drive is, right? A flash drive is a small device you could store your data and memory on, and when it's plugged into a PC unit, it can transfer all data and memory onto said device. Only in this case, the nomu has to simply touch you in order for you to see its memories. Izuku's eyes widen as he comes to the realization of what is about to happen. Izuku speaks as tears begin to fall down his face. No, please, I beg of you, please don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, please. Please don't. Underneath All for One's mask is a devilish grin. He then says, I'm sorry, Izuku, but I can't let what you did just go unjustified. All for One kneels down to Izuku's level, looks Izuku in his eyes, and says, It was very nice meeting you, Izuku. Goodbye now. Izuku yelled, "No! No!" All for One then raised his hand on Izuku's head, and then he spreads the parasite to Izuku's cerebellum. Izuku just sits there in the chair, his eyes widen and his mouth open. In Izuku's mind, he is on his knees and in the dark place. Only this time, he is alone. Looking up, he sees a white light in the shape of a rectangle. The light slowly began to fade to show reality, showing All for One, the Makapichu, and Shigaraki. All for One speaks. Are you in control? Izuku looks to the screen and sees from a different point of view as the screen moves up and down. All for One speaks. Good. Now, Izuku, I know you can see me and hear me in there. Don't worry. Tomorrow, you won't be concerned with anything anymore. But for now, here is your third punishment. All for One tells the nomu to kneel down. From where Izuku is, a rush of anger and rage fills him as he looks into the eyes of the monster who took his family. But deep down, Izuku feels scared more than ever, as he is about to bear witness to the murder of his second family. All for One speaks, and now Izuku, the nomu, will use hard drive on you all night long. Nomu, you may begin. Izuku's face, in reality, drops many tears. The Makapichu then reached out to touch Izuku's face. Izuku in his mind stares at the screen as if it was a window, as he continues to beg and plead for them to not do it. But in the end, there was nothing he could do. The Makapichu came in contact with Izuku's face, and then its memories started flooding Izuku's mind as the dark place then turned into a blinding white light. And when it lifted, the torture started. Izuku saw everything from when the nomu escaped from the lab, to when it took shelter into the mountains, to when it killed its first victims, to when it killed Khan's parents. Even that one night, it encountered Izuku's family. But there was more to the story that night. Because in the nomu's memories, he was originally chasing an Arctic wolf. It was running away from him. And then it ran in the direction of the gray wolves, and it found them. And then it slaughtered them all. Izuku's mind felt like it was about to split into two, as he was forced to watch the carnage as his loved ones were dying. And the way he was forced to watch it was through the eyes of the monster, so he felt like he was the monster who killed them all. "Please stop," said Izuku, but the memories kept coming. At the end, the Makapichu took as much as it could carry, and then went back to its cave. The memory of that moment played over and over again. Izuku couldn't take it anymore, but then he remembered the Arctic wolf the nomu was originally chasing. There was something about that wolf that looked familiar. Izuku realizes back when he was a small cub, a group of Arctic wolves tried to take him from Khan. But then Izuku blew them away with the snowstorm. That wolf that the Macapichu was chasing was the leader of the Arctic Wolf tribe. He's the real reason his family was killed. Izuku was in so much bewilderment because now he really does feel like this was all his fault. Izuku falls to his knees tightly, closing his eyes, covering his ears, wanting all this to be just a bad dream. But when he opens his eyes, the horrible memories were still playing. There was nothing Izuku could do but watch all night long. The sun has risen. Shigaraki opens the door to the cell as he sees the same thing he saw last night, the nomu with its hand over Izuku's face, showing him his memories. Shigaraki approaches the two and says to the nomu, "Nomu, that's enough." The nomu takes his hand off of Izuku's face, revealing his face. His eyebrows were narrowed, and he continued to look to the wall that was in front of him. In his mind, Izuku's face was blank, as if he had officially lost his mind. He didn't care about anything anymore. Shigaraki kneels down and says to Izuku, "It's time to go. Do you understand?" Izuku's head nodded up and down. "Okay then," said Shigaraki. Shigaraki then unlocked the chains from around Izuku. Izuku then stood up. Shigaraki speaks. "Now, the both of you, follow me." Both the Nomu and Izuku followed Shigaraki to a different building where the attack on the USJ would take place. Everyone except for All For One was there. When they reached the place, Shigaraki told both the Nomu and Izuku to stay where they were as he went to go get ready for the attack. Izuku just stood there like a mindless zombie. Everyone in the room sees him. One person says, "Hey, wait a minute. Isn't that one kid that went nuts the other day on that monster?" Another person said, "Yeah, I think he was." "What the hell's the matter with him?" "I don't know, but it's probably best to not bother him." After a few minutes, Shigaraki along with Kurogiri came back. Shigaraki ranted on about what they were going to do in the plan. While he was doing this, Kurogiri approached Izuku with his black hoodie and chains and says, "Here, Izuku, you might need these." He hands Izuku the hoodie and chains. Izuku takes the hoodie and he puts it on. Kurogiri speaks. "I really do hope you understand me, but please, be careful out there." Little did Kurogiri know he was not speaking to the real Izuku. He continued to speak. "That's fine. You don't have to say anything. Just stay safe, okay?" Kurogiri then walked off back to Shigaraki. After Shigaraki is done talking, he calls to Izuku and the Nomu. They both walk up to each other, and Shigaraki speaks. "These two are our most powerful weapons, so if I were you, I would not get in their way. Now, let's go. The kids should be arriving any moment now." Shigaraki turns to Kurogiri and says, "Open the portal." "At once," said Kurogiri. Shigaraki looked to Izuku and said, "Come over here. I want you to come through the portal with me." Izuku obliges, standing next to Shigaraki as they walk through the portal, entering the USJ. They both look around, and then they look up to Class 1A, just at the top of the stairs. And after all the hell he went through, Izuku finally gets to see his brother, Shoto. In Izuku's mind, where the real Izuku lies, he says in a whispery voice, Shoto. And that's the end of part 4. Now, I get that this was a very long part 4, but man, I really had a lot to explain in this one. So anyway, I really do hope that everyone enjoyed this What If. I don't know if anyone had read the new thing that I wrote down in the community tab saying that I'm going to start doing 4 parts before I move on to the next What If. I'm going to start doing 4 parts of each What If, and then I'll move on to the next one. But I also put up a voting poll that asked people if you guys wanted me to finish this What If or that What If, and a lot of people are voting for Firewolf. So I'm going to get started on that one, but I still have 3 more parts of Ice Wolf to do before I can get back onto that one. So with that out of the way, I do hope that everyone has a nice day. I hope everyone enjoyed this What If. And if you made it to the end of this video, consider yourselves #blessed. And I hope that everyone has a nice day again. Have it 3 times great. Bye-bye.